Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Johnson from Manhattan Beach PD in California. She has 24 years experience in law enforcement. So really looking forward. This is like we've been waiting now for a couple months to get this together, and I'm really looking forward to this episode. So thank you so much for being here, Chief Johnson. I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you for the invitation and for your patience and getting this on the calendar again. I really appreciate it.
No, if anyone's listening, it was totally my fault. I had like a power outage in the middle of our first conversation. So that was on me. And so I'm really excited to have you here and I appreciate you hopping on. I know you've been in this career for 24 years. We talked a little bit offline and I'm really excited to talk to you about a few different topics, but I was hoping that maybe you can give some background into you.
Certainly. I'll start with I'm lucky every day. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a police officer, and I kind of have gauged my whole life with that goal in mind. And I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I always thought that I would be a Houston police officer. And back then, Houston cops drove powder blue cars and they wore powder blue shirts. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. They even had a recruitment video with like a rap song. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a Houston cop. And so I kind of geared my whole life toward that and the decisions I made growing up and things like that. Growing up out of high school, I went to college for a semester and a half, and I just really wasn't grown up enough really to participate in college meaningfully, at least in my own experience. I was doing fine, but I knew that I was going to have to start studying soon as I progressed in my college time, and I wasn't ready for that. And I grew up in a household where you go to school or you work, but you don't lay around. And so I made the decision to enlist in the Marine Corps when I decided I wasn't ready for college. And I will tell you that enlisting in the military, any branch, will grow you up in a heartbeat. So I was kind of a 19-year-old layabout like we all are, and at that age, and I joined the military, and it was as promised. I saw the world. I was stationed in Japan for a year. I got to travel to a bunch of really cool places and meet a bunch of really cool people. And I actually thought for a little bit that I might make the military my career, but what I really didn't like about it was all the travel. And so, traveling's great, but I really wanted to put down roots. And so as I got close to the end of my enlistment, I started to apply for police departments in Southern California because that was where I was stationed. And I was lucky enough to get hired by the Orange County Sheriff's Department, where they put me through the academy, and I worked there for a little about 4.5 years, working in the jail, being a jail training officer and a weapons instructor. And then from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, I spent a little over 14 and a half years at the Newport Beach Police Department, where I went through the ranks, officer, sergeant, lieutenant, and just had a blast. It's a great community, a great department, and I really had a lot of fun opportunities to serve. And I never thought I would leave Newport Beach. And there became an opportunity to take a captain's spot at the city next door, Laguna Beach. And I applied for the job thinking it would be great experience. And then they gave me the job. And I kind of left everything I knew to become a captain at another police department. And when I landed at Laguna Beach, it was about 6 weeks before the pandemic. And it's not something I recommend anyone do is take a new job before the world's going to shut down for the first time in like 100 years. But that's what I did. And I was in a meeting with all the department heads, and our city manager was very cautious when he started hearing about COVID. And he points to me and he says, "Hey, Rachel, you can be in charge of our COVID response." And I did what anyone would do. I said, "Isn't that the fire department's job?" And he looked at me and he said, "It is, but you're going to do it." And so for the next 18 months or so, I worked with him, the city manager and the city council almost daily on our COVID response. And if you recall that rapidly changing time where the rules changed every day and what we're doing changed every day. And through all of it, I got a really bird's eye view of what it's like to work in government at the executive level, working with the city manager, working with the city council, working with the mayor. I had an absolute blast in hindsight. And when I was doing it and we were working all these days in a row, I was very tired, very engaged, but very tired. But when I look back on that time, we really did a lot of great things for our folks. And so again, never thought I'd leave Laguna Beach. I thought I'd sunset my career there, but there became an opportunity to become chief at Manhattan Beach PD. And it's very much like the cities where I spent most of my career. A small town where people really love the city and really love their police department. And I was lucky enough to be appointed almost 3 years ago now in August 2022. They say blink and you'll miss it. And I feel like that about my career. I feel like one day I was in the academy and the next day I'm talking to you as a chief, and all the time in between just really has flown by. And I just really have a heart of gratitude for the experiences I've had and the people I've gotten to meet. And I look forward to the next 3 years and what that brings for me as well.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I really admire people like yourself who know who they are and what they want in life. I can't relate to that. And I always wanted that. I think I was so lost in my early years. So to hear someone like yourself say, this is what I always wanted to be, and I did it, is so inspiring. And I also agree with you that if you blink, you miss it, because I had that realization recently. I was like, where has the time gone? Like it's crazy. Like I was listening, I was actually listening to a song that was in my high school years. I was like, oh, this was, my junior year of high school, it kind of like takes you back. And I was like, it's been a long time, and I don't even know how that has gone by so fast. And I think now as I get older and, if you have that perspective, you try to really be as present as possible and try to notice everything even more so now because we do have that experience of things just going by too fast.
No, you're totally right. And what I've always tried to concentrate on in my career and what I tell people when I give career advice is like, don't be so worried about the next thing that you miss this thing that you're doing.
Mhm.
It's great to have a plan for your career. I've gone in and out of having plans in my career. Some of my plans, best laid plans did not come to fruition, but others did.
Yeah.
And but I did not want to miss what I was doing in the moment because I wanted something for my resume or I wanted this thing or that thing. And so I really have always tried to stay present and enjoy what I'm doing. Still keeping an eye on the future, but like always having fun in this moment because we spend so much of our time at work, and you really want to look back on it and say, I had a good time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that I think we do that. I think that we always want to be older. We always want like the next thing in our life, and there's so much growth and learning in the journey. And I maybe that sounds a little like woo-woo, but I think like it's the journey, not the destination always. Like you'll get to the destination, but like how can you have as much fun and growth and learning in the journey? And I think that we miss that sometimes.
Totally. It's easy to see that, oh, I want this or I want that, and it's close and it's right in front of me. And it's always a balance. I tell people you can't neglect your career, but you also need to enjoy where you're at while you're there,
Yeah.
at the same time. So it's always a balance of trying to enjoy myself, even as a chief, I love this department, I love these people, and I love this city. And I don't want to go anywhere else, but I have to remind myself sometimes, like don't just do all the things that you have to do for your job and not do some of the things that you could do, whether that's meeting a group of kids who's having a tour of the station or something like that. Oftentimes I'm a little bit busy and I can't say hi, but when I can, I always remind myself, go do that. That's what fills up your cup. That's what makes you feel good, is meeting people who are excited to see police officers, who are excited about life in general, which is generally most little kids. And I just have to remind myself all the time, like take a little time for those fun things as well, because again, this will all be over too quick.
Yeah, and you were that little kid that wanted to be
Absolutely.
like you,
Yeah,
like your
absolutely.
yourself wanted to be right where you are. And so if you have the opportunity to inspire other people too, I think that that's a great opportunity. I wanted to ask you, has your definition of success evolved throughout your career?
It really has. I think when I was a police officer or a deputy, success was, making few mistakes, taking care of my peers, and treating people with respect.
Mhm.
And those things never go away. But as I became a sergeant, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm responsible for a team of people now. And so my definition of success became less about me and more about my team. Are we being successful? Are we being safe? Are we learning? Are we growing together? And as you evolve in the ranks, from a sergeant and being your team to a lieutenant and being your shift and the other people you're managing, to a captain where you have a whole bureau, And as a chief, my definition of success has very little to do with myself and a whole lot to do with my folks. If they are thriving, if they're growing, if they're being safe, we're making good arrests, we're providing accountability to victims, that's when I feel like I'm winning. It's not about what I'm achieving, because much of what I achieve, if you will, these days is we get our budget approved, right? And that's really wah, 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 in terms of fanfare. But that's what I achieve in the background, and that's great for our department. But for me, seeing people thrive, seeing people follow some leads and some hunches, and take people to jail for crimes that have really impacted our community, that's what I deem success now. And so it's definitely less about me and more about we, especially as you kind of ascend the ranks in the department.
Yeah. I'm curious because I know you've been in this career for a long time and it's very apparent that you love what you do. What do you think is maybe the biggest challenge right now in the context of wellness for law enforcement? We know a lot of things have changed since 2020, and there's a lot of different unique challenges with shift work and all the things that you guys experience out in the community. What do you think is maybe the biggest challenge today?
I think one of our biggest challenges with wellness is defining it and what it is. I try to do that through my actions at work and the things that we promote. We have a really good wellness team here at the police department where we do fun things, like we have a fitness challenge going on right now called Fit for the Shift, where you do a body scan at the beginning and the end, and you look at most percentage of fat loss, most percentage of muscle gain, and there are prizes, and so that's fun. There's been a lot of camaraderie. We have a WhatsApp thread where either we're motivating each other or crying about the food we're not able to eat right now, but we're having a good time. And I try to promote those types of things, like being physically well, but also, again, it's very squishy to define. We want people to feel good about coming to work. We want them to be mentally well. We want them to be physically well. But we also, have to realize that a lot of people that are in our profession, whether that's professional staff or our sworn officers, took these jobs at really young ages. I've been in law enforcement since I was 23, and
Yeah.
I thought I knew everything at 23, but I will tell you now that I, in fact, did not know everything then. And, we have a responsibility to our folks to help them as they grow. And so some of the things that our wellness team does really well, and I can take zero credit for this. I'm just going to tell you about it because it's great stuff. We offer classes on financial wellness, on trust, building a trust, or having a family trust, on managing stress, and all these other ancillary things, because we tend to keep people for decades in this profession. They start with us in their late teens or early 20s, and they tend to stay for the most part. And so there is a component of wellness helping them understand, like how to live in the world in the broader context. What can be so hard is, one, defining it, and also you have a lot of wellness practitioners out there, and this is not to disparage anyone who has their own business, but it can be hard to really screen out all the noise and find out, like, what can I do that this vendor has that would really benefit my folks, and spend what limited dollars we have on that kind of stuff wisely.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I know that you have a robust wellness program because we've talked about it before. But one of the things that you told me that really stuck out, and I was hoping you could explain what you meant by this. You said, mission first, people always.
Yes, that's my tagline. When I was in the military, the Marine Corps always had a saying, first priority was mission accomplishment, and the second priority was troop welfare. But oftentimes, the accomplishment of the mission and troop welfare were almost in contrast to each other, just because of the operational needs of the military. And we don't have those same sorts of concerns like, a military does. But for me, I think what I keep at the forefront of my thoughts and how I make decisions is mission first, people always, where they are co-equal things. We have a mission to do here at the police department. We're a business that produces nothing. We don't produce widgets. We don't produce nothing, but we're a business. And part of our business is to maintain, safety in our community, be a highly visible presence to deter crime, and work with our community as partners in crime prevention. Everyone has a role in that, from our newest intern to our most seasoned officer. And it's important that they all understand that we don't meet our mission without all of their contributions because they all make a difference. I know police officers, we get a lot of the credit for everything that goes on at the police department, but much of what we do cannot be accomplished without our professional staff helping us out. And it's important to acknowledge that and help them understand that they are part of us meeting our mission here. The choo-choo doesn't get out of the station without everyone trying to meet the mission. But the other part of it is people always, because who is doing all the work? It's the folks in the building and our folks in the field. And if we aren't treating those folks like they matter, if we aren't making sure they feel like they have agency here to say things that advance the goals of the department, we're failing. And so for me, people always has four tenets. One of them is wellness, like we've been talking about, like mental wellness, physical wellness. We have, on-call clinicians that are culturally competent that anyone on our team could call day or night for help. And all we get is a bill. We don't get their names or anything like that. Just so if someone's had a rough day that maybe didn't rise to the level of what we think is good for a critical incident debrief, they can still have that debrief that they need to help them move forward. But being physically healthy is part of it too. And working shift work, like you mentioned, it can be very difficult to eat well. And so we contract with a local company that will deliver healthy meals to the department twice a week. The employees purchase those meals themselves, but we have a big commercial refrigerator to hold all that food so that in the middle of the night, instead of reaching for a delicious hamburger, maybe you reach for something that's a little less loaded in saturated fat and salt and things like that. And so we're always trying to do more of those things and remember that the people here, they're not numbers, they're not ID numbers, they're how we continue to be effective as a police department and as a community organization. The second pillar is pretty simple. It's accountability, and that's we're gonna do what we say we're gonna do, and if we don't, we're gonna own it. And that means everyone from me all the way down to our newest person. I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, you told me you were gonna do this, and you didn't." And I'm like, "Holy smokes, I am so sorry. I will fix it." And I do, and I move on and I fix it. And that's what accountability means. It's not a bad word. Sometimes we're just busy and we forget to do things, or we think we did something, or we made a mistake. It's being accountable to ourselves, being accountable to the public. The third pillar is professionalism. When I started in the business, we kind of told the public what to do. We treated the general public like we treated suspects, where you tell a suspect, sit on the curb, kick your legs out, cross them at the ankles, and don't move. We did that to the public when I started, not quite as blunt as that, but we no commented our way through everything. If you recall, 20 plus years ago, we didn't talk about anything that we did. We weren't transparent, and we weren't really trying to engage the community in policing with us. Well, that's changed, and the community expects that we're going to be transparent, that we're going to be professional, that we're going to explain what we do and why we're doing it, and that we're going to be nice about it. And I got to tell you, those aren't unreasonable expectations. And so we're going to be professional, and we're going to create raving fans wherever we can. I realize that someone in handcuffs is generally not a raving fan. But there are a lot of other people that we work with every day that we can make raving fans. And what we try to keep in the forefront of our mind is most people have 1 to 3 interactions with the police in their life. And they base all of their opinion on policing on those few interactions. And so if you think about it like that and not think about it in the context of your whole day as a police officer and how many people you talk to, but how many people that person's talked to that are like you, it really makes a difference. And you want to make sure you make that interaction count, if you will. Even if you give someone a citation or you take enforcement action, you want them to at least walk away feeling like they were treated with respect and courtesy.
Yeah.
And then the final pillar is succession planning. I got here as chief with about 6 years on the clock before I could retire. And so for me, that meant that I wanted to really work hard at training my replacement internally. I will forever be blessed to have been appointed a chief coming from another department. to come here, but I would really like the next chief to come from within and the next everything's to come from within, which means we have to do a lot of planning for the future, whether that's professional development, whether that is bringing our employees along with us to meetings so they can understand the tensions and the things that we go through, but planning for that future at all levels. There are some people who don't ever want to promote past officer, and I love those people. I respect those people. I need those people, but they're still part of our blueprint for the future. They still have ways that we can develop them professionally so they can be the best officer, detective, whatever that they can be. And so everyone here is part of that plan to continue to evolve the department and move it toward the future. And so that is my very long-winded explanation. Question first, people always, but it is the lens which I look through everything that we do here at the police department.
I really appreciate the approach of invest in your people and try to make sure they have all the resources that they need to be successful. And I really liked that you were talking about accountability too, because I think that what I heard was accountability and grace. I think that if you can understand, and I try to remember this too, I think that sometimes historically, if I'm being honest, I held people at a higher standard than myself. And I would always expect other people to like do something. And then if someone came at me and said, hey, like, you're not living that either, and having that moment of like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like I expect you to do something, then I also have to be an example of that. And I think if you can come from a place of supportive, and really trying to make sure that everyone is getting the things that they need in all aspects of their career and life. And I think that that accountability comes a little bit easier. I think that it can be more of a conversation than a judgment. So that's what I heard a little bit of like, someone coming up to you and saying, hey, you said this, and you being approachable enough to take that information and say, yeah, you're right. Do you think that having that culture that supports each other, that culture that is really trying to make sure that you succeed as a human, as an officer, whatever role you have within the organization, do you think that that has helped to make your wellness program more successful and it's created more of that buy-in and that culture of wellness?
I certainly think that, trying to invest in the whole person is why our wellness program has been so successful, is that we spend a lot of time trying to make people feel and understand like it's okay not to be okay. Let's take care of each other. Let's take care of things before, they become insidious. And so I think that that is what has helped our program be successful is it's really come from a place of caring about our folks and caring about each other and realizing that this career is very long and while it can be very rewarding, it can really take a toll on you.
Yeah. You said something when we talked offline, and to your point of like it can really take a toll on you. You said that you've seen how stress can literally make people sick. Can
Yeah.
you explain your experience with that?
Sure. When I was a sergeant, I think I'd been a sergeant for a couple of years. I was involved in two officer involved shootings about 6 weeks apart. And, and I consider myself a pretty strong person. I had been involved in an officer involved shooting, a handful of years prior to this period of time I'm talking about, and kind of got through that pretty well. But after the second shooting, I had this pesky cough for weeks that I could not get rid of. And really, what I attributed it to was the stress of those two officer involved shootings back to back. And I don't know if the stress was different because I was a supervisor at the time or what it is that I saw versus when I was an officer and got in an officer involved shooting. But I was literally sick. I was coughing, all the time. And just a pesky cough that you can't get rid of, that, the doctor says nothing's wrong with you. And it was really just stress related to those critical incidents. It's very hard as a person, you want to keep your empathy and you don't want to harden your heart so much that these things don't affect you. But the fact is they do, and it can really take a toll on your body as well as your mind.
And what did you do to help with that?
I did a lot of one, giving myself grace, like realizing that I was going through something and that I needed to acknowledge that. I spoke with a therapist. regularly and often to get out my feelings. And I talked to other people who were involved in those shootings about how I was feeling and found out that they were feeling the same way. And I think that combination of making sure that people knew that they weren't alone in how they were feeling,
Yeah.
um, giving myself a little bit of grace and talk therapy really helped me to heal and, put those events in a place in my, my heart and my mind where they weren't harmful to me.
One of the things that I hear a lot is, um, obviously California is a little bit different. I think that you guys are really progressive with wellness, and I've talked to a lot of individuals in California that say the stigma is gone, if not almost gone. But there's still a lot of places throughout the United States where it feels like there very much still is stigma for getting help. And I like that you said feeling like you are not alone. And then through your shared experiences and stories, you're also letting other people know that they're not alone. And one of the things that I heard that really impacted me was, you can't, someone said this to me, they said, you can't expect to walk through the mud for 24 years and not get your boots dirty. It's these things are
True.
going to impact you. And so, I'm curious, do you still see a stigma, or do you still feel like maybe there's pressure to be quote unquote tough and to not seek out those resources? Or do you think that things have evolved beyond that point, at least where you are?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that people are far more willing to push others, especially to get help and therapy and sometimes inpatient treatment. But I think that there's still that stigma because every department has their own culture. Every department looks at things differently and how they view themselves, how they view the community, how they view the work that they do. And so I don't think across the board at all, even in California, do we have a singular message on wellness that makes people feel like it's okay to seek help or it's okay to be impacted by things. Here at Manhattan Beach, when we have a critical incident, we have a debrief within 24 hours where we mandate everyone that was involved in that incident, come and speak with a clinician. And they don't have to say anything in that meeting, but we're going to have the meeting and they're going to be required to be there. And they're going to be given, some information about what they may see or feel on the next couple of days, and also how to talk to a clinician one-on-one if they desire. And so I think for us here, that emphasis on this is like people know it's going to happen. They know they're going to be invited to participate, makes it a lot easier for us here to admit we're not okay, to look for that in others and try to get them help and really wrap our arms around each other. But we've made it a production here for it to be not a thing, where we invite a clinician once a quarter to go on ride-alongs. And, she just goes from car to car all day, just talking to people about, everything and nothing, just to get her face out amongst the department when nothing is going on, so that people feel like they can talk even then. But it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, and quite frankly, it's a lot of money. And
Mm.
I'm so grateful that our city continues to place emphasis on this and continues to fund it for us. But a lot of departments are making choices about what they spend their money on. And sometimes this isn't one of them just because they're trying to buy basic necessities for their officers. And I think that's where we start to see that difference between what this department does versus what that department does, and also how it's perceived at those departments.
Yeah. I I really like the approach of how can we provide support on the front end and on the back end, because that there's always going to be things that have to happen as a reaction, right? There's going to be a critical incident and you're going to need support as a reaction to that. But how can you also front load that? And so people know that they have resources and that they're supported before some of those things happen or when something isn't quote unquote wrong. And so I appreciate that approach of how can we have like competitions? How can we have, someone in the squad cars talking to our people when there's not an incident so that they know that it's okay to have like I kind of call it like the preventative maintenance, almost like you would on your car, like how can we be more proactive so that when there is a critical incident, you know that you already have resources that kind of soften that a little bit. Um, I wanted to ask because, I do think that that is a challenge for everyone is funding. I think that people are, um, they don't really know what to do. There's a lot of agencies out there that don't have a program at all because to your point, it's like, what do we need? How do we know it's going to be effective? How do we know that it's going to have an ROI? What do we spend our money on? Do you have any advice for individuals in leadership who are maybe in that position where they're like, we don't even know where to start?
I do. The first thing I would say is start small.
Mm.
Talk to your peers, talk to me, um, and find something small that you can do that you can sustain, whatever that is. Whether that's just getting a group of people together who can, internally respond if someone has a crisis, who can reach out to them. Start with something small and then build from there. it there is so much to be said about wellness, whether there are companies who have made wellness a business and they do good work. This is not to disparage them,
Mm.
but my point here is that it can be overwhelming
Yeah.
if you're starting from scratch. And so start with something small that you can do. Like, can we as an organization have a group of people who can receive the appropriate training, who can at least be there for our own internal folks if someone's parent dies or they have a personal crisis. Let's start with that and get that going. And then you branch out from there as you see what is available and as you get your group going. But don't be afraid to just start with one thing and add things on as you vet them and as you figure out where your funding and your bandwidth lies for your team.
Thank you. One of the things that stuck out to me that you said when we first talked was that you want your kids to know your name.
Yeah.
What have you done in that area? Because, that's one of the biggest topics, I think, challenges right now is that work-life balance. How have you, throughout your career, been able to prioritize your work-life balance in your family?
Yeah, I think I always laugh when I hear work-life balance because it's never balanced, right? And someone once told me like aim for work-life fit. And ever since I started thinking about work-life fit over work-life balance, I think I've been more successful. And really
Mm.
what work-life fit means is that you try to fit both in and you place importance on different things at different times. Whether it was, this weekend I had to go to something for one of my employees who graduated from a program, but it was also my kid's 19th birthday, right? I did both, but that meant that I got up early, got my workout in, went to my employee's graduation, and then celebrated it with my kid. And, I'm a little tired from all of that, but it was important that I do both. And so, I made time for both. And one of the things I do every day is I keep track of the amount of time I'm spending at work or on work when I'm home. At work, for both, I'm really trying to make sure that I am not overcommitting to work in terms of my time because there will always be work to do. My wife jokes that on my last day at work, I'll call her and say, I'll be home after I do these few things because that's my phrase. I'll be home after I do these few things. And there's always a few things to do. And so I have this app that kind of tracks my hours so that I try to remember, hey, go home. Like these few things will be here tomorrow with another few things. But I want my kids to know what I look like. I want them to see me growing gray and not all of a sudden realize that I've gone gray because they haven't seen me. But I'm also trying to stay married. This is a really tough job being a police chief. It's fun, it's rewarding, it's challenging, it's all the things. It checks all of the boxes, but I will only be the chief for so long. I will be someone's spouse for much longer than that. And so in order for me to keep, harmony in my relationship, I also have to go home. I also have to pay attention to how much time I'm spending at work and how much energy I'm giving work from home. And sometimes that means, working from home on one of my days off and then date night or going for a bike ride. Whatever, thing comes up, based on, the time of year and what we have going on. It's just that remembering that while this job is great and I love it, the people that got me here and the people that will be with me long after I retire are at home. And then as an aside, I also want my kids to want to visit me in the home when I'm older. So I need to spend time with so that they remember, oh, she was good to me. I will go and make sure she has enough velour tracksuits to keep her good to go. So it's always about remembering that work is always important. It's how I support my family and how I support myself. But the people at home are the reason why I do the work.
Yeah, I really like that. I have never heard that before, work-life fit. I'm gonna coin that, but I'll let them know I took it from you. So
Okay,
you'll get the credit.
perfect.
But I agree with you. I think that a lot of times what we do is we limit ourselves to this idea that we don't have the time. I think that that's something that I hear across the board, and I've done this within myself too, where I'm like, oh, I don't have time to do this, or I don't have time to do that. And I think that it's more of a reprioritization of your time. And that's what I heard in what you were saying is I make it work, I make it fit, and I might be tired, but it's a priority to me, so I'm going to make it happen. And I think that it's a really good reminder to anyone who's listening. Like sometimes you have to take a look at what your schedule is and how you can reprioritize some of the things so that you can do, I wouldn't say do it all, but you can fit in the things that matter the most. And I think that can be with anything. I hear it in the simplest of terms. Like even you said it, you're like, I had two things that I had to do. So I woke up really early and I worked out first. And then I made those two things happen. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you don't have the time to do a workout, but maybe you do it 4 o'clock in the morning and you can make it happen. It's just that reprioritization of time. So I appreciate that. And I also, one of the things I heard is there are some people out there who are afraid to retire because they don't know their family. Like
Right.
they feel like a stranger in their own home and they don't know their family. And so they're afraid to retire because they're like, I don't have anything at home. Like I put everything into work so much so that I'm a stranger in my own home. And so I think that that's a really important message that, the people that are in your life matter and they deserve your time and attention when you can.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A couple things you said there resonated with me. And the first one was about, working out. I'm always better off for my sake and everyone's sake if I work out.
Mhm.
Like it keeps my anxiety low and it also like makes me feel like at least I got this done because sometimes as a chief I spend my day putting out fires. Some days as a parent I spend my day doing the same thing. But at least I got that workout in at the beginning of the day if everything else kind of falls apart on me. And so I really try to prioritize that, but also give myself grace. I don't work out the morning after city council meetings because we tend to get home pretty late. And so I let myself have that extra hour of sleep every other Wednesday instead of working out just because sleep is important too, right? Taking care of yourself is important as well. But my family's great, and my kids they're all teenagers, and they're all awesome kids. They're typical teenagers, and they remind me of me more than I will ever admit to them. But they deserve my time, and I look forward to having more time with them because if I retire when I'm planning to, they'll all be young enough to still go on vacations and things like that together. When they're on breaks from college and things like that, and that's what I'm looking forward to because I go. My kids are homeschooled, so they go on 4 or 5 vacations a year, and I usually go on one or two with them because I can't spend all that time away from work. And every time I do it, I'm just like, oh, I miss these sassy people, and I love this kind of stuff. And I just, I look so forward to having more time with them. And, but I have friends who, I ask and I'm like, when you gonna call it a career? And they're like, ah, I still have more to give. And I get that. I will retire pretty young, and so I will still have more to give, but I'm going to give it somewhere else. I have a lot of great ideas for part-time work, so I don't drive my family crazy. But all, but all of it is, not doing what I'm doing now because I want to give other people the opportunity to sit in the chair and be the chief and not outlast my replacements because I don't choose to retire. And so I have really tried to like not forget the things that I liked even as I've ascended in my career. Like, yeah, you like cycling and you love baseball and so I try to bring all those things to my everyday so that when I look around in a couple of years, it's not like, what do I do? It's really how do I fit all of it in?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that because I think the goal is that you have a retirement that's as long, if not longer, than your career was.
Right.
And you're healthy and happy and you have a family intact and you get to do all the things that you want to do, like travel and play baseball and go cycling and do all of these things. And I think that sometimes the longevity is forgotten about, the steps that need to happen proactively in order to create that longevity. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that's a reminder for everyone else who's listening too. And I think that too, and we've said grace a few times, and I think that we can be so hard on ourselves. And so if there is anyone who's listening that's like, man, like I haven't been really prioritizing the things that matter, today's a really good day to start. It's never too late to start making more positive and healthier choices for yourself and your family.
No, totally. And it goes back to what I was saying about wellness programs. If you start small, and that's what I did, was start really small, um, it's easier to add things on and continue. I had a goal of working out 6 days a week for a long time, and I was failing, and
Yeah.
I was really disappointed in myself. And I said, "What about let's look at the days that you don't work out, right?" And everything's on my watch, and so I know, okay, you tend not to work out after city council meetings, and you tend not to work out on your first day off because you're running errands. So why don't you give yourself those days off and see how much better you feel about accomplishing this goal? And so that's what I did. And now all of a sudden I work out 5 days a week just fine, you
Yep.
know, and without, and so sometimes it's like, well, you can't change everything. I'm not going to drink, you know, a gallon of water a day and get my workouts in and, start reading more. Like it's all not going to happen together, but it can happen over time. You can add those things in little by little. And before you know it, you look around and you're working out and you're meal prepping and you're doing all these things that you wanted to do. But I've just found starting small and just adding on has really been beneficial to me.
Yeah, I really like that because I agree with you. I think people get so burned out, and there's usually times where this happens, right? Like you go to a conference and you come back and you're like, I'm gonna do 50 things, or like you,
Yes.
or it's January, like new year, new me, and like everything in my life is gonna change. And so I think that if, to your point, start small, something realistic so you feel successful. And when you feel successful, then you feel like you're more motivated to add other things. One of the things I had to do, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but I think it's been really helpful for me. So I did the same thing you did, where I was like, clear my schedule midday. I am going to work out from noon to 1 every day. And then I realized that that is my busiest time, to work and to take.
Right.
So I was always filling those times with meetings and like things I had to do within my business. And I was like, okay, well, now I feel like a failure because like this isn't working. And then I realized in myself, okay, I am never ever going to work out after work. Like
Right.
for me, and I know some people it works for them. So find what works for you. But for me, it's never going to happen. Like I am so tired. I'm hungry. After I eat, there's no way. Like I'm just dead, and so I had to be realistic and say, okay, when can I fit this in? It has to be early morning. And I'll tell you, I am not a morning person. I am a grouchy, like wake up early, snooze 6 times type of person. But it was one of those things, like we talked about before, it was a priority to me. I also think that if I'm going to talk about wellness, I have to also be participating in wellness. Like I can't just tell other people to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And so now I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I'm in the gym by 5. And it's not every day. I have other things, throughout the week that I do for my wellness that it's outside of fitness, but that has been successful for me to figure out when can I make it happen and then can we progress from there. And so I really appreciate that approach because I do think people they get discouraged and then they don't do anything at all. It's like I'm a failure, so I'm going to give up.
Yeah, it's so tough, and I'm by no means a morning person. And every now and then I get to work in the morning and I go work out right away once I get to the station. And every now and then someone tries to engage me in conversation. I'm like, oh. Wasn't ready for this, because I plan my workout the night before and I know what I'm going to do. And that's kind of when I kind of think through my day and kind of set my intentions for my day is
Yeah.
during my workout. And so when I talk to someone before, sometimes I'm like, oh, the synapses are really not synapsing right now, but I'm here. But yeah, if I tried to work out at lunch or after work, I have about a 10% success rate
Right.
doing that just because the day gets away from me and I'm tired. But in the morning, I know what I'm going to do. I plan it the night before and I just go and do it. And, before I know it, I'm in the shower and it's easy. And that's the way I've been able to be the most successful with what I want, my intentions actually, meeting my actions.
Yeah. And I think too, there's other things that I try to tell people because to your point, you can stack things, you can build on things. And I always tell people too, like sometimes you don't have to carve out extra time. Of course, if you're going to work out, that's going to be extra time that you have to carve out. But in the context of holistic wellness, there are things that you can do during things that you're already doing. So you can do a grounding or a gratitude practice while you're in the shower. Just say three things that you're grateful for, or try to just be super present in the shower and not think about stuff. You
Right.
can do controlled breathing techniques on the way to work or on the way home to downregulate before you walk in the doors of your home. There are things that you can do to prioritize your wellness that don't take extra time. And so that's one of the things I try to do as well. It's like, yes, I know I have to carve out extra time for fitness. I can't really do that while I'm sitting here on this podcast. I'm like doing like a hit workout. But there are things that I can do throughout the day that don't take extra time. It's just, again, what we said before, it's the reprioritization of the time. It's like, okay, I know that I'm going to be in my car at some point. I know that I'm going to take a shower. I know that I'm going to brush my teeth. So, how can I infuse a couple minutes of nervous system regulation so that I feel more level? I feel less anxious, less stressed. How can we do that throughout our day so that we feel better physically and mentally? So, that's a little piece of advice.
No, thank you for that. And yeah, you're right. Like whether that's sometimes I listen to a podcast while I'm working out or while I'm driving home. And it's making good use of that time. I'm going to be in the car anyway, or I'm already going to be on the exercise bike or the treadmill anyway. Let me do something else with that helps me. So it's definitely always trying to look at where I can get a little more out of my day to help myself.
Yeah. I have one final question for you.
Right.
What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
If I could tell someone earlier in their career, I would say have fun. Like this job is an absolute blast. It is still fun to drive lights and sirens, even though I don't get to do it very much.
Mhm.
It is still fun to make arrests for people who are victimizing others and take them to jail. Enjoy it, but also never forget why you wanted the job, because that is the thing that will save you, whether you are a police officer or a police chief. What keeps me grounded and what keeps me focused is remembering you took this job to help people. You took this job to be a part of this community. Remember that when you're directing traffic in the hot sun for several hours, or you're dealing with a really difficult family dispute, or you're taking unfair criticism in the media, is remember why you're here. If you can have fun and remember why you're here, this career will fly by and the opportunities that you will have will be overwhelming.
Thank you. Those are great words of wisdom. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming
Absolutely.
on with me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.